everybody, and welcome back to another Doctor Who Big Finish audio drama review. In today's review I'm going to be taking a look at yet another release from the Big Finish 2020 main range, and it's of course the 7th Doctor double bill story, The Flying Dutchman as written by Gemma Arrowsmith and Displaced as written by Catherine Armitage. This release is currently available to be ordered now on the Big Finish website. The physical CD is £14.99 and the download is £12.99. This release does of course see the 7th Doctor as portrayed by Sylvester McCoy, alongside his companions Hex and Ace. So I must admit, it has been a little bit of an unusual few weeks, hence why this is a review of a release from September. I do believe it's around October now when this review will be going out. Basically, everything is going on in the world, isn't it? And as a result, I've not had too much time to be listening to Big Finish, so at the minute, we're playing a little bit of catch-up. Of course, the current main range release is in fact Shadow of the Daleks, featuring the 5th Doctor, and I think that when I come to tackle that release, it is going to be one whole review of both parts that are going to be released in October and November, as that seems to be a more sensible way to tackle that release, as well as being a little bit easier to film as well. For the meantime, we have a 7th Doctor story, in fact 2 7th Doctor stories packaged together, and since it's October we have 2 stories that have the general theme of hauntings and the paranormal, making it an absolutely perfect Halloween release. Both of them kind of challenge this TARDIS team. We have Hex especially challenging the different thought processes of the 7th Doctor, definitely hitting home on the fact that this is a very manipulative incarnation of the Doctor, who likes to play his companions about ever so slightly, and certainly has more knowledge than them and doesn't really share it too often. Of course, you have The Flying Dutchman, which is a story entirely set on a boat, and then we have Displaced, which is a story that I didn't really know what to expect. We have a house and a bird creature on the front cover, and it's a story that I think is worth listening to alone. It's one of those stories I definitely recommend going in not really knowing too much whatsoever, because the story reveal at the very end is something that is possibly one of the best twists in a Big Finish audio drama that I've listened to in quite some time, and as a result the review will no doubt be ever so slightly vague in order to hide those plot points. Taking a look at the production credits now on the Big Finish website, the senior producer is David Richardson, the sound design and music is Howard Carter, producer is Emma Haig, the director is Samuel Clements, the cover art has been created rather excellently by Simon Hollab, and of course the script editors are Matt Fitton and John Dorney, with the executive producers being Nicholas Briggs and Jason Haig Ellery. This is one of those releases that is really good for the new listener, because of course we have 2 one-hour stories, and as a result we have 2 episodes that are rather fast-paced and do rather different things. As a result, if you're somebody who's looking to get into 7th Doctor adventures, however are a little bit unsure if you want to delve into the big 2-hour stories of the main range, this is kind of a midpoint, and you get 2 stories for the price of 1, so what is not to like? The Flying Dutchman, written by Gemma Arrowsmith, is a rather self-contained adventure set entirely on a boat at sea, being tossed about the rough sea waves. The crew are uniting with the one main aim to get their cargo back to port. However, the one thing that haunts all of their minds is the mysterious, ghostly Flying Dutchman. It's a Doctor Who take on a sea ghost story, really realising the themes of paranormal ghost adventures. If you're a fan of historical stories, you may like this one, especially historical adventures that are set on boats, with the entirety of this episode really focused around that whole idea of boat hierarchy, people climbing up the ranks to higher positions, and those who don't get promoted feeling rather salty about it, especially when they believe that the captain isn't very good. It's a small microcosm of society that also becomes quite lonely and detached from the rest of the world, of course being at sea for the vast majority of their lives. I can't deny I do always feel like I'm missing something with the Hex, Ace and 7 TARDIS team. Hex has been around for quite a long time within the Big Finish back catalogue, and as a result I've not really heard the vast majority of his previous stories, and I feel like I'm missing out, as each time I hear more Hex I really like what I hear. It's not that this is a story with plot points to previous eras or anything like that. If anything, it feels like a dip into an era that I know very little about. The dynamic between Hex and Ace is very strong and unusual. There is a balance between them that is very close, almost like a brother and sister, but also simultaneously a little bit of romance lurking in there as well. It makes Ace as a companion feel younger and like a teenager, which of course at this point within Doctor Who history she is, and it makes the adventure feel a little bit more reckless and fun. The Seventh Doctor's manipulative side comes to the forefront throughout this plot, and Hex addresses that, accusing him of always being the one playing weird games where he is the only one that possesses the answers. And as always with haunted Doctor Who stories, there is a theme of paranormal or alien involvement, and the answer is something that I'm not going to reveal as it adds another level to the plot, and it makes quite a lot of sense. In fact, both of these stories on this release relish in that Halloween spirit of ghostly hauntings and aliens and that possibility of the unknown, and both stories have explanations that are quite unexpected, especially within the case of episode 2, which is pretty damn tragic. Special shout out to Carly Day, who plays Archie and Anna, who is a girl that is on the ship pretending to be a boy, as back then girls weren't allowed to be a part of the crew. It's a lovely little journey with the character and her reveal at the very end of the story. It's also great to have a connection with Ace, allowing both characters to create a form of natural bond, with Ace also presenting herself under her fake name, of course her real name being Dorothy. As I mentioned previously, I haven't really listened to the vast majority of the 7th Ace and Hex adventures, and as a result, I'm not particularly aware of the origins of Hex. However, something that I'm definitely getting from this story is that regardless of if you've heard some of the previous episodes or not, this is a rather good jumping on point to show the adventurous nature of this TARDIS team with lots of different dynamics. You have the manipulative 7th Doctor, you have the rather outgoing and excited Ace, and then also at the same time you have Hex, who is a paramedic, very caring about people. I feel like this story, for only 1 hour long, is a rather nice introductory adventure. And finally, for this story, I would just like to give a mention to the director, being Samuel Clements, as well as the music and sound design by Howard Carter, because this story sounds absolutely brilliant. You definitely get that sense that they are on the boat in the middle of nowhere, and there's nothing to see but the waves of the ocean. It will be a story that is rather difficult to visualise on TV, and as a result works very well within the audio drama format. And it's also nice to see the 7th Doctor attempt to steer a boat as well. That's not something you get to see in your average Big Finish story. So in conclusion, for the Flying Dutchman, it's a story that I do quite like. I must admit I was a little bit uncertain to start with, however it kind of has a theme about it that feels very Scooby-Doo. I love the way that we have this mystery that is of course used of the Flying Dutchman and this ghostly apparition of a ship along the entirety of its crew, and basically them being a potential threat to this real boat of real people on, and as a result we have the Doctor and his companions kind of trying to figure out what is causing these seemingly ghostly apparitions, and they can't of course criticise what is right in front of them. They can't deny the existence of these ghosts. The Doctor believes that there is a rather simple explanation behind it, and I'm not going to reveal what that explanation is. However, I like the way it works, and again it's very Scooby-Doo in the way that it is done, and at the very end of the story I love the way that Gemma Arrowsmith kind of sits the audience down and goes, right, this is the story that you've just listened to, this was the character's motives, and kind of this is why it happened, and this is how it was done, and in a way I was kind of expecting the quote of I would have got away with it if it wasn't for you meddling kids in there as well, because it just makes sense. It's a satisfying 1 hour episode. I like the way that it challenges the characters, I like the way that it hits home rather personally to some of the people throughout this story as well, and I think that the 7th Doctor is encapsulated rather nicely throughout this story. He is a character that has all of the pieces, and more than often he's not willing to share those pieces. He kind of leaks splices of information and likes other people to kind of work out the rest, to kind of show that they are worthy of his presence, which I must admit, if I was a 7th Doctor companion, I would kind of get a little bit tired by that as well, constantly feeling the need to almost prove yourself to him. But at the end of the day, with the 7th Doctor and Ace, we have a rather student-teacher relationship, of course, of Ace always calling him the Professor, and again, that's kind of seen throughout this story, really replicating the early era of the 7th Doctor that we get to see on TV. Displaced, as written by Catherine Armitage, is a great audio story to take your mind off current events, the restrictive life of lockdown, and seeing very little of the outside world, as this story is set entirely within a house, to which the TARDIS team are locked within. Oh, how very relatable. I always love the way that Big Finish is a suspension of day-to-day life. Studying a lot for my law qualification, it's great to be able to take my mind off things away from the world of law, with a story that has an underlying theme of relating to deeds, equity, and land law. Was this story basically written for me, he says, while surrounded by loads of law notes and basically staying inside for the vast majority of the day. The team arrive in a house where the occupants of the family home have completely vanished. The doors and windows are locked and the TARDIS isn't letting them leave. With Hex being from the ever so slightly distant future, he is aware of the usual house mod cons, like the house's assistant, Harry, whom you can ask anything to, the likes of the weather and different songs, and personally I never think that type of thing will catch on. Displaced keeps you guessing throughout the extent of the runtime, and to be honest it did make me question at some points if I did actually like the story. The first half sets the scene well and the second delivers the alien-ish involvement, but I do think that part 1 needed a little bit more to pad it out. What I did like about part 1, however, is the lovely observation made by Ace about how caring Hex is as a person. He likes people and he likes the whole concept of memory, about what makes a person a human being, and even though that he doesn't actually meet the family throughout this episode, he grows rather attached to them living within this home. He just seems to be a person that really loves life and as a result can be considerably relatable, and you know that he's rather kind at heart. Meanwhile, he questions the Doctor and Ace's possible obsession with danger and threat and adventure, possibly being desensitised to the fact that people do actually die within the dangerous situations that the TARDIS lands within, and the Doctor and Ace seem to simply just travel through them, not particularly acknowledging it. This is a continuing theme throughout this story, especially given that all of the characters are trapped within this rather small house. It means that tensions are rather running high between this TARDIS team, and once again we get that continuation of Hex having a little bit of a go at the 7th Doctor, believing that he's manipulating the situation and that everything is a test. I'm not going to talk about the ending of this story in too much detail, as it has quite a twist, and one that looks beyond the veil of it's just another sci-fi alien story. There's a really human level to this episode that the Doctor doesn't particularly notice, allowing Hex and Ace to step into the limelight, and boy does it deliver, presenting the truth in a way that is so grim yet very much so believable, and it's something of which that happens, sadly, in reality, really hitting home the fact that monsters aren't always from outer space, but sometimes they're hidden on Earth as well. I think that it is no spoiler to say that there is a little bit of alien involvement throughout this story, as there is a massive crow-like creature bang on front of the cover for this release, and that is of course the Crow. An interesting concept, and to be honest I kind of wished that we got to see a little bit more of them, perhaps in the first part of this story, just to pad it out and make it a little bit more interesting within the later half. Especially when you have that large revelation in the second half of the story, it makes the first half seem ever so slightly quiet and needing a little bit more drama, but admittedly it is a story that just simmers away. There's lots of drama going on and you don't quite know what plot point the episode is going to pick up next. It keeps the listener guessing, and it is also considerably immersive given that it is in a rather normal setting of an everyday English home. So in summary for Displaced, what a story. Once again, I went into this episode rather uncertain. I didn't quite know if I liked it. I kind of felt like, where is this going? What is it doing? However, within the second half, we kind of have this newfound respect for the episode, and it kind of hits home at another level. And again, I love the way that it challenges this TARDIS team. I love the way that Hex has a little bit of a go at the 7th Doctor. I love the way that Ace also has a little bit of a go at Hex, and kind of, they had two very different ways of going about things. I think that Ace is very easy to follow the 7th Doctor and very, very guided by him, and doesn't really think beyond the box sometimes. She will just follow what he wants to do. And then you have Hex, who kind of challenges that. He puts his foot down, and I'm presuming that is probably because he's a little bit older than Ace. He's kind of questioning the Doctor's judgment, and that is something that is vital to this story. It is vital to working out the narrative, and it is vital that the characters figure out what the Doctor doesn't, because as a result, this story takes a completely different twist because of that. The first part was definitely a slow burner, but by the very end, overall, as a package, it is a really satisfying story, and more than anything, it's a story that I respect. It has a rather adult theme underneath it, that even though we have all of these horrible, horrible species out there in the universe, sometimes the most monstrous people are your everyday members of society. So in summary for this release, it is an interesting one. I certainly wouldn't recommend it above all the other releases within the Big Finish main range or anything like that, although it is two fairly stable stories. I imagine that this will hit home, as I say, to a certain type of Doctor Who fan, because both of the stories do kind of, even though they have two different locations entirely, one being on a boat and the other being within a rather standard modern day house, both of them have rather similar vibes, and I imagine if you like one, you will certainly like the other. As for the relationship of this TARDIS team, that is what makes this release interesting. Now, I imagine that when the Big Finish main range ends within 2021 and we move to the box sets, I want to see a revamp for the Ace, Hex and 7th Doctor relationship. I want to see a new jumping on point that is going to give us all the information that we need relating to this TARDIS team, as opposed to at this point me kind of feeling like, because I'm not listening to those rather early stories within the series, I'm almost missing out on some of that character development. But I suppose as those CDs now go out of print because they are quite old, it's something that you can only really expect with an audio company that has been going for over 20 years by this point. But it's fun, I like it, it's a good episode, or good 2 episodes. I suppose if you're looking for a release that's kind of spooky and haunting, perfect for these now wintry cold nights, this is definitely one that is worth considering. So thank you very much for watching this review. I hope you have enjoyed it. Do of course stay tuned on the Host Productions for brand new Doctor Who content each and every week. Of course, on that note, I shall see you all next time. Bye for now.